Good morning, everybody. And here it's 8 o'clock in the morning in the dark woods of Finland, getting darker and darker. Pretty soon, not too much daylight. Just brought up this little brochure that Tuya has put together, and it's just reminding us all of the new group of World Servers Festival Week coming up in just about a month, really, because today is the 22nd of November. Now, next week will be Thanksgiving. I already got it wrong by 1 week. I called up my daughter and I wished her a happy Thanksgiving and found out I was a week early. But okay, and we'll be providing you with this document in a corrected form. And here is some of our activities that we'll be going through. Lots of broadcasts and webinars, and there's a few little corrections that we have to make here, so don't worry too much about this, but just to let you know that this is coming. And I know it's Christmas season and a family time, so whenever you can join us, that's great. And let's see, a little bit, excuse me. Yeah, we're actually holding this in person, and I realize it's getting to be a little late in the day, and we can never have too many people. In other words, we probably have to put the cap around 10 or 12. But if for some reason you are moved to join us in person, then please let Tuya and me know. So I'm infinitize8@gmail.com. You know that probably by now. And Tuya is Tuya_Robbins@gmail.com. So, where are we? Well, I guess we're to the point where we can say hi. I'd like to welcome you here. And I know for some of you it's really early when I think about, a little bit. I think about the United Kingdom, it's very early. And when I think about South America, it would be just, middle of the night. And out on the West Coast, it's possible to join, I suppose, and here in Finland and in Australia and New Zealand, not too bad. So, but we move things around so, excuse me, people can participate. And if you've missed something, well, you can always get it from Makara, because we are reading through the Glamour, A World Problem book, just the way we are in other broadcasts. We're reading through the reappearance of the Christ and through the destiny of the nations and through Cosmic Fire tonight. And that starts at 8 o'clock GMT. And I put in the chat box the Cosmic Fire link in case for some reason you don't have it. We're not covering a lot of pages at any one time, but we're getting, I think, a good foundation. So you can copy that for yourself if you'd like to join us at 8 p.m. GMT. All right. So, Alex, hi and welcome. Anna, Annette, and Antoinette. Ario, good morning. Barbara, Catherine, Frederick, Gretchen, and Karen. I'm sorry. Kim, good morning, or whatever time it is for you. Leslie and Margot and Mariut. And welcome Martha and Michael and Natney, Rebecca, Risto, Vera, and Zenaidi. And over here, Joe and Michael Stacy are keeping us on track, Couldn't do this without the team, so we're very grateful to everyone on the webinaring team for their participation, sometimes at difficult hours for them. Now, I guess what I haven't done is I'd like to pull this up at least, the AAB diagrams, and I always like to start with the top, which is Parabrahm. Something about Parabrahm, even though this is not the real Parabrahm, this is an indication of Parabrahm. But for the great one and only absolute, there is a kind of projection that we call an absolute deity, and before that deity, we might say that there are 7 supreme spirits before the throne of that particular God. Well, we don't have to worry too much about that. It's mostly 7 spirits before the throne of our planetary logos. That's where we're focused, and it's still very, very high in the planetary scale. And then when we start to think about our solar God, then our sacred planets take the place of the 7 spirits before the throne. It's all incredibly organized, and what we're trying to do in our glamour work here is to reveal the structure without distortion. Distortion makes the revelation and appreciation of the truth impossible. And if we can eliminate the distortion, then we'll see things in their true beauty, and that would be, that would be an amazing thing, and it's a thing that's coming up for us at some time. Now, also, I always like to get these diagrams that have been made improved, I would say, by Tuya, and there we start with the egoic lotus, where everything is shown to us of our unfoldment in the lower worlds. According to the condition of our egoic lotus, so is the degree of unfoldment that we have managed to engineer over millions of years, existing in the lower worlds of the personality. Well, let's call it the dense physical body of our planetary logo. So all of this is taking place within a large context here. I hope I welcomed everybody that I could at the time. Rebecca, if I didn't, hi, and Anne, and good morning to you. All right, so now we were just having a definition of illusion. We had begun to go into illusion and what it really means. So, picking up a little bit from the last occasion, we were more or less on page 130 and 131 of the book, and we're talking about ideas and how they become obscured, how they cannot be properly absorbed, how our emotional reactions distort the truth of an idea. So we read a little bit of this before. To the members of the hierarchy, the idea and its effects are not only interpreted in terms of human thought forms, as we tend to do, and human idealism, as we tend to do, but they are also to be contacted and studied in their relation to the mind of God himself, and to the planetary kingdoms, which I suppose are found throughout the various planets. Quite a few planets have their own humanity. Our neighboring planets, of course, that's just the stuff of science fiction these days, but apparently, according to the ageless wisdom, they do have their own humanity, and our ideal is the kind of humanity which has achieved a great deal on Venus already, a humanity which is ahead quite a bit of our humanity. Now, the origin of ideas, well, from the buddhic plane on up, really, these ideas come from, and they emanate from, the buddhic plane, which is seldom open to the consciousness of the average disciple, and certainly is not open to the content of the average idealist. So, when we look at, this is it right here, and that's the realm, one of the realms in which the masters work, and in a way the masters can only work on the first 5 of the lower subplanes, and subplane number 2 and 1 are for the moment cut off from them until their rank is increased. So that's a pretty high level, and we can understand why we most often do not get any kind of ideas directly. Sometimes we imagine that if we feel maybe a wave of love or affection or something of that, or kindness, that we're on the buddhic plane, but really it's more the higher levels of the astral plane from which those kinds of responses emanate. All right. And now, these ideas come from and emanate from the buddhic plane, which is seldom open. Okay. I would here remind you that few idealists are personally in touch with the idea which has given birth to the idealism which they follow, and which is a emotional and somewhat limited thing, but it's better than nothing. And the age of Aquarius, as we have learned, I think, in reading The Destiny of the Nations, that's the practical idealism coming in the age of Aquarius. The age of Pisces is an age which really fostered idealism, whether or not it was practical. We know that under Pisces, or through Pisces, come 2 particular rays. You know what they are, right? The 2nd ray and the 6th ray at this time, and same for Virgo. So let's just say that I guess all of us are idealists to a certain extent. We are believing in factors which are dismissed by others as being unrealistic and even non-existent. And for us, these subtle structures and relationships and planes and states of consciousness are a very real thing. Sometimes we actually experience them, and other times they are for us a working hypothesis which seems entirely rational, reasonable, and even necessary. So we live with people like ourselves. We live with different assumptions than the average non-aspiring person will do. And if you just watch television for an hour or two, and with all the advertisements and the different kinds of shows that there are, we're going to see that the true student of esotericism does live with different assumptions about reality than will the average intelligent person. Okay. So few idealists are personally in touch with the idea which has given birth to the idealism. Remember that an idea is a being, incorporeal, without body, that gives shape and form to shapeless matter. So form and matter are not really the same. Matter is of the third aspect of divinity, and form is of the second aspect. So the people here, they are only in touch with the human interpretation of the idea as formulated by some disciple or intuitive. It's a very different thing than the way a member of the hierarchy approaches an idea. Although I must say that if we get more and more deeply into a book like a treatise on cosmic fire, that our ability to relate the idea to larger contexts will definitely increase, and we will begin to think in a supra-personal way, and even still higher than that, as I give the name, an impersonal way, in the context of our planet and solar system and points beyond. So in our move, we're all of us moving into the fifth kingdom of nature, and we do that through initiation and through sacrifice. In our move, we are learning to expand our context and to free ourselves from the kind of restraints that conditioned our consciousness when we were only interested in strictly human factors. Now, we read this little bit last time, and I think it's very good. And I copied it off, and maybe you'll want to, I don't know, Joe, maybe you'll want to put that in one of the boxes there for people to copy. Okay, an illusion. See, he's trying to be precise about what these things really are, and we use words oftentimes in an imprecise way. Anyway, he's getting more and more precise with these definitions. An illusion can therefore be defined as the consequence of an idea translated into ideal being regarded as the entire presentation. See, so as always, partiality is involved, and when we study glamour, it is the partial point of view which so often leads us astray, and which is corrected by wide reading of expansive subjects, the kind of reading that DK offers us. So this idea is regarded as the entire presentation, because we don't get the full idea. We just get an aspect of it, which we become emotionally attached to, and we create an ideal out of it. So it's looked at as the entire presentation, as the complete story or solution, and as being separated from and visioned independently of all other ideas, when in fact they are really to be united. Let's just say ideas are to be seen in relation to many other ideas, and we don't do that, unfortunately, because we don't want to bother our heads about it, and we only want to handle so much complexity in our life, not a great deal, and we want to make things a little bit easier on ourselves. So we simplify in a way that is not warranted. Okay. So our particular ideal is visioned independently of all the other ideas, whether these ideas are both religious in nature or apparently completely unrelated to religion. We do remember what Master DK said, that the conceiving of spirituality only in terms of church matters was one of the great victories of the Black Lodge, because it cut out 6/7 of possible spiritual approach. And that is, of course, a very partial view, and that will be adjusted as we move into the age of Aquarius. In this statement lies the story of separation and of man's inability to relate the various implications of a divine idea with each other. So our problem is the lack of capacity to really relate one thing with another. There is a degree of complexity as you begin to study interrelations, and so many of us would like things simple so that we don't have to strain ourselves with excessive thought. Now, by the time we become a student of spirituality, it's a different matter, and we want the truth, even if it has to lead through the complexity before we get to the true simplicity of Shambhala. So, and as we know, if separateness is involved, we are involved with the one great mistake, or the one great, we call it a heresy, a mistaken thought, and that is the great heresy of separateness, which we try to overcome through our very correlative study, verging on pure reason, which Master DK has given us. So, when visioned and grasped in a narrow and separative manner, there is necessarily a distortion of the truth. Now, usually the word distortion is involved with glamour per se, but let's just consider it to be misunderstanding of the truth. And the disciple or aspirant inevitably pledges himself to a partial aspect of reality or of the plan, and not to truth as far as it can be revealed, or to the plan as the members of the hierarchy know it. I think we get the idea there, don't we? Well, maybe if we only did get the idea. I used the word idea in an imprecise manner. So look, study along the second ray line, because it's so broad and so detailed, is really, in the best sense of the word, disillusioning. And sometimes we look at it as a sad thing in life when we become disillusioned, and we go along with a long face and say, oh, I was so disillusioned, shake our head. But in fact, it is a method of release to become disillusioned, to become free of the illusions one was holding, regardless of how pleasant they were. So there's a lot of shocks along the path of discipleship, and I think, when you read the rules of the road, they're found in various places, but I think in discipleship, number 1, it says, each sees and knows the villainy of each. And yet there is, with that great revelation, no turning back, no shakiness upon the road, no rejection of each other. The road goes forward into day. So there's lots of shocks, and it's always happening in the sixth ray. Sixth ray people put the guru, the teacher, whatever, on a pedestal, and then inevitably they start shaking the pedestal, and the person they put there falls off the pedestal, not being quite perfect, and they are shocked and disillusioned. But in fact, it's a movement towards truth. I'm remembering when this happened quite recently with Sai Baba. He was born in the 29th degree of Scorpio, with a lot of Scorpio around there, and obviously, teacher though he was to millions, he had his struggles, and then some revelations came out about him which were rather unsavory, and the whole community was thrown into shock. Some continued to believe, and some were disillusioned, and probably the ones that were disillusioned were being, in this case, closer to the truth. Okay. So let's be careful of what we pledge ourselves to, and make sure it's not just a tiny little piece of the greater whole, if we can manage to use Jupiter to include that. This illusion evokes in the disciple or idealist an emotional reaction, which immediately feeds desire and consequently shifts off the mental plane and onto the astral. So this is, what can we call it? Let's call it by this name. We'll call it this is the descent, DSCENT, of an illusion into a glamour. That's what we're looking at here. It's amazing how unclear we really are about many things, and how a master like Master DK has come along to help us clarify our consciousness. So this descends onto the astral plane, a desire. So this is where the glamour comes in, because it's oftentimes accompanied by fervent desire, right? A desire is thus evoked for a partial and inadequate ideal, and thus the idea cannot arrive at full expression, because its exponent, that means the person who believes in it and promotes it, sees only this partial ideal as the whole truth, and cannot therefore grasp its social and planetary and its cosmic implications. So I think the idea here, well, I always use that word. So try to see broadly and understand broadly, and avoid this illusion of partiality which becomes a heated glamour. Now let's pause here for just a second and think back in your life. This particular, I see that's not going to work too well, is it? Let's see if I can possibly make this a little, I'll do it that way. Okay. Think of times in your incarnation when you looked at one thing, a part of something bigger, and you considered it to be the whole thing. And you became so excited about it that you pushed that point of view and ignored other values which would help complete the whole. Can you find any such instances in your life? Can you find those at all? And let's ponder a little bit on that. Let's ponder on that. I mean, I'm thinking about, there's a book called by a misleading and a tricky title, which is very engaging. It's called something like The Last 5 Lives of Annie Besant. As you know, she was the head of the Theosophical Society, and she was also the president of India at a certain point in the early 20th century. So you would think, well, now we're going to look up Annie Besant's previous incarnations. But no, it was all about what looks to me like a very strong sixth-ray personality. And she kept on changing her enthusiasms. She would go after one thing, and she would think this is the answer. And she would become disillusioned, and then she went after something else, and finally, I think she found theosophy. So every one of those pursuits of the ideal was like a lifetime, and that's what it meant, the last 5 lives, something like that. And maybe you've had moments of partial pursuit, or the pursuit of partiality. So I'm going to ask that. If you had moments of the pursuit of partiality, well, let's just meditate on that a little bit. Now, you see, if you just invest too much enthusiasm in any partiality, you are ignoring other substantial values in the wholeness from which your ideal came. And then they say, well, and then you wake up sadder but wiser, And I suppose many of us have awakened after fervent pursuit of some ideal sadder but wiser. Like DK says, sometimes this has to do with, I'm sorry, I have something in my eye here, has to do with the pursuit of another individual, that one glamorizes and exaggerates only one day to wake up and find another person like himself, and maybe looked at for better reasons, and you see the whole person instead of just something that you are exaggerating, and it looks absolutely wonderful to you, like a Walt Disney animation or something, The Princess and the Prince. Okay. Well, think about that, because the first tendency is naturally to follow with excitement a partial version of a larger idea. And if we can catch ourselves, that's one of the great ways out of glamour. Let us catch ourselves, you see. Where there is a real grasp of the whole idea, and DK's being quite realistic with us here as well. He says, a rare thing indeed, there can be no illusion. Now, isn't that interesting? And it just makes us a little bit vigilant, doesn't it? Because he's telling us that we rarely are grasping the whole idea, but some part of it which we invest with a lot of emotion and enthusiasm, and turns out to, because we've done it that way, to be a distortion of the larger picture. Just imagine people saying, my country, right or wrong. This is, frequently found. We don't bother to really look at the idea that a country represents and its real present state of development, but we just go with the flag and start waving the flag and exaggerate the importance of our nation. Nationalism, okay? And what about the individual reflection of nationalism? What about egoism in that lower sense? Same thing. Like some people near us, in our eyes, can do no wrong. We're seeing that right now. I mean, if I may say, as a United States citizen, we're seeing the exposure of the truth of certain individuals. And those who are kind of willing to look at it soberly, see what's going on. There are others who are so taken with the individual that they refuse to see what the truth reveals. We'll talk about that a little later. I mean, I'm sure that wherever there are big and important elections and so forth, you have the wild idealist who is distorting the picture of the person who's up to be voted for, or who is the leader, the leader, Duce or Führer or whatever, not analyzing at all what's really there in a sober and realistic manner. It certainly simplifies things for us and prevents undue mental analysis with all the strain that goes with that. So, where there's a real grasp of the whole idea, and remember, people are ideas too. A rare thing indeed, there can be no illusion. but it takes some work, right? The idea is so much bigger than the idealist that humility saves him from narrowness. Just avoiding excessive investment of belief in anything and keeping a detached and sober point of view. Humility, what is humility? Says the Tibetan, an adjusted sense of right proportion. This is humility, an adjusted sense of right proportion. But look, do we really want to see? That's the question. Because there's pain in seeing and pain in knowing, and oftentimes the pain is subtle. And sometimes the average human being is a pain-avoiding entity. So we will do a lot, even change our consciousness in an inadvisable way to avoid the pain of truth. So truth can hurt, as they say, but that's only the beginning steps. Later, truth is a great bringer of consolation and not of pain and hurt. Where there is illusion, which is unusual and commonplace, and a vague interpretive reaction to an idea, we find emerging fanatics, vague idealists, sadistic enforcers of an idea as grasped, and history has been full of some of these people that you just wonder how they can treat their fellow human beings in such a way. One-pointed and narrow men and women seeking to express their interpretation of God's idea, and limited, cramped visionaries. I'm remembering I visited early days the home of Manly Hall, and he was a wonderful scholar, and a lot of second ray and seventh ray. He seemed very connected with Master R somehow, and his wife Marie. Now, I think they're both gone by now. It's a long time ago. I know Manly Hall wrote extensively. And you know that Francis Donald is offering webinars on Manly Hall's really, really big book, and I mean big book. So big, you really have to carry that book. It's like weightlifting. And Manly tried to look at all the different philosophies and ways of understanding the ageless wisdom, whatever he may have called it. His wife Marie was a devotee of Master R, and she was so much into it that all of Manly's breadth was maybe not of much interest to her. Only this one point of view about Master R and what he was doing and how he did it, and the funny thing, and how Manly was always getting it wrong. So I figure seventh ray soul and a sixth ray personality, something along that line. And so I was a little shocked when we visited that she was pushing her point of view so strongly. Well, there may have been a lot of value in that point of view, and she may have been an excellent student of those things, but it was partial, very partial, and therefore, in a way, necessarily under illusion. So that was one of my first experiences with people relatively highly placed who were suffering from illusion. And the illusion there of partiality, but not manly so much. He was very, very broad, very inclusive, and was using that second ray energy to see all the different aspects of it. So, we had something going on there that was maybe an emerging fanaticism. That looks like the one out of the choices we're given right here. And we'll never get the whole picture and never get the truth as long as our emotions are so strong that we just have to fulfill them with respect to some ideal, and we become, I would say, willfully blind. That's the kind of word I want to use. Blind to truth. That's what happens to us. We become willfully blind to the truth. So, you can wonder, have you been there? Have you ever pushed a point of view so hard in a discussion or argument that you miss the value of the other person's point of view? I know I have. I used to, having been on the sixth ray so much in my lives, I used to like to engage in discussion people who were fundamentalist in nature. And I, of course, had the truth, right? They did not. And in the process of the discussion, I think I overlooked what that particular point of view may have been doing for them, some kind of value that may have been emerging for them. It wasn't the whole thing. And I was pushing a higher truth, I thought, but I didn't see the whole picture. And maybe you have had experiences like that in your life too. Such illusionary picturing of reality and such visionary showing forth of the idea has been both the pride and the curse of the world. Whoa. That's pretty strong. Because apparently there is some value to it. Each one of us has to have a vision. We have to climb the mountain of vision. As he says, climb it for yourself. I've helped you a lot. Now, how many of you are climbing the mountain of vision for yourself? And what are you seeing? Everyone has to have a vision at first, before the true revelation comes. So, this picturing of reality, it is one of the factors which has brought our modern world to its sorry pass, and it is from this misuse of the divine faculty of touching the idea and transforming it into the ideal that the world is today suffering, and probably inevitably. Now, you know, when you look at some of those films, photographs, you know, because we did have those things at that time, of Germany, let's say, in the early days of Nazism, you know, before later, when the bombs started to fall back on Germany, it was a different story. But in the beginning, people were crazy. They were just transported out of their mind. It was a huge glamour based upon the illusion of the master race. Yes, there is such a thing as the master race. The hierarchy demonstrates it. It's not like a particular race, it's more like a group. There are masters, yes, but one national group or racial group, ethnic group, cannot appropriate that idea entirely to itself. And that was a huge mistake. And then along with it came the enthusiasm of Aries and the susceptibility of the Pisces personality. So there was an immense glamour generated, and it was for a time. Excuse me. As it says here, the curse of the world. The imposition of these humanly and mentally interpreted ideas in the form of limited ideologies has had a sorry effect upon men. I recall, you know, going back to Germany again, World War I, this time, that some of the higher ranking people in the military and government were the devotees of a certain woman who was channeling messages from the star Aldebaran in Taurus. And they believe this. You know, of course, it's not possible. That's a huge source, and it has everything to do with what is not glamorous. It has to do with the dispelling light. But it was a glamour, and they believed it, and they carried it forward. And there was this thing called the Thule Society, Thule, Thule or Thule, and it was very, very racist and exalting, again, Germany as the master race, even back in those days. So it's more like Hitler walked into that kind of thing. He didn't generate it himself. It was in the air, you know, and it was probably put there by the Black Lodge itself, realizing how susceptible to that illusion and consequent glamours the psyche of the German people at that time was. So the imposition of these humanly and mentally interpreted ideas in the form of limited ideologies, and there you have a very limited ideology, has had a sorry effect upon men. I'm recalling a story about how when Einstein offered his theories of relativity, what special relativity and general relativity, and the German scientists just couldn't take it. At first, they said, this is absolute nonsense. Well, it certainly was nonsense from the point of view of the fifth ray concrete mind which they had cultivated, but also because of the racial factor. Einstein was offering these things, and he was not a ethnic German, pure-blooded German. He was a Jew to be despised and so forth. And so they rejected his idea until they began to see that, wait a second, there is genius in this idea, and it's true. So then there began to be some German practitioners who became the nuclear physicists and also presented a very great threat to humanity at the time. But it's so easy to just hang on to a part of what you know and reject something else. The Black Lodge is doing that all the time. They are rejecting the energy of love. The need to learn to penetrate to the true idea which lies behind their ideal and to interpret it with accuracy in the light of their soul, besides employing those methods which have the warrant and the sanction of love. They need to learn this. And they don't know it yet, and we have to question ourselves, to what extent are we partial, and therefore distorted, and therefore in illusion, misinterpretation, and fervent desire for a distortion which is unreal? We have to ask ourselves. It is, for instance, no illusion that the idea which finds expression in the statement that all men are equal is a fact which needs emphasis. This has been seized upon by the democratically inclined, and it is indeed a statement of fact. But, if we know what a monad is, it's a statement of fact. Okay, it is indeed a statement of fact, but when no allowance is made for the equally important idea, the other idea, as part of this larger complex of ideas about equality, when no allowance is made for the equally important ideas of evolution and of racial attributes and of national and religious characteristics, then the basic idea receives only limited application. Hence, the enforced ideological systems of our modern times and of the present day, and the rapid growth of ideological illusions. We just have to make very sure that we are not suffering under an ideological evolution or illusion, let's just say, ideological illusion, as he describes. Some people think that their teaching, as good as it is the only teaching worth studying in town. That would be a mistake, wouldn't it? There's so much to learn from the different ways the ageless wisdom has been presented. So, hence the enforced ideological systems. Communism, we enforce it. Fascism, we enforce it. Democracy, in a way, can be enforced too. And the rapid growth of ideological illusions, which are nevertheless based upon a true idea, each and all without any exception, but the whole is not seen. That's the problem. Now, I recall, I did it again. I went to, at that time, deeply communist China. It's 30 years ago. And I had with me some books. And I was going to make sure that those Alice Bailey books were well placed among those who could benefit. And I saw a lot of people, and I gave away a lot of books. Not a lot, because you couldn't carry too much, and you could be found out, and it was not exactly allowed what I was doing. So I was brought to a very great I Ching scholar. And he's an old man. And he really wanted the Cosmic Fire book. And I was only too happy to give it to him, thinking that I had handed over the secrets of the universe to this man who obviously was from the old tradition and was deeply into the mysteries. And after talking a lot, more than I should, and being translated, and not allowing him to speak very much, he said to me, well, if you ever want to learn something about the I Ching, please come back and see me. And I realized I had blown it. In other words, I had done this partial thing. The I Ching, very important, especially in the deeper understanding of the whole thing. And here was a great repository of that teaching, and I totally missed it. I could have benefited greatly, but I was upholding a partial presentation. As vast as Cosmic Fire is, it was still partial. So that was a tough lesson. And as I bring it up even now, I feel, but at least maybe if one understands the mistakes one has made, one will not repeat them so fast again. It is again I'm almost finished, friends. It is again no illusion that the development of the Christ consciousness is the goal of the human family. But when it is interpreted, and that's the problem with illusion. The problem with illusion is misinterpretation. That's the problem. So, when it is interpreted in terms of authoritative religion, and by those in whom the Christ consciousness is as yet undeveloped, I can hit you on the head with the Bible, but it doesn't mean that I know anything about what's in it. It becomes simply a nice concept, and often a sadistic incentive, and thus enters immediately into the realm of illusion. Just look at the Inquisitions as they have occurred in the last 500-600 years. And we see what he means by sadistic incentive. Okay, well, that's it. It's very interesting material, I think. And I just want to put this down here so I don't get lost again. And I hope you've gathered something out of it. So this is the end of number 137. And this is 22. And reading number 77. And the next time we get together, which will be, now, I don't know what to expect. We have to just see. It will be the end of Thanksgiving Day in the United States. So we'll see who can really join us. So this is evening, and we're on page 133, and it will be reading number 78. Okay. Hope you made it through that. And now what I'd like to do is, if you've taken any notes, if there's anything you'd like to discuss, any questions you have, any reminders you have experienced, as I experienced that horrible I Ching reminder, a real opportunity lost because I was sure that in Cosmic Fire I had the truth, or a greater amount of truth than could be found anywhere. Typical six-ray stuff, and learning the hard way. But I think there's a lot of lessons all of us learn the hard way. So I'll take a look here and see if there's anything that you want to question or talk about. And I'll I'm sorry, Tuya, I meant to put you over to the other side, but then I got going. So you're on the other side there now. Does anybody want to?
Michael.
Michael.
Friedrich has put in a number of comments in the question box.
Okay, good. Yes. Okay. Very good. Good morning. Okay. And good morning, Frederick. Frederick has helped us so much with many matters and with a great migration from Yahoo to the Makara website, which was going to be necessary lest we lose our whole archive. So gratitude for that, Frederick. And does grasping the whole idea mean a direct connection with our inner soul? No mental pollution in the connection line, and early awareness of idea might reduce the illusion. Okay, well, my thought about that is that the mind is fine as long as it is illumined by the soul. Now, when we look at what we usually call the soul, we realize how very much it's on the plane of higher mind, and how the dynamics of higher mind play into the first part of soul revelation. So I think one of the things that Master DK is trying to do is to teach us as students that there is a lot of mind in soul, and that we do not have to approach soul as if it were only sentient and only intuitive. There is mental illumination connected with it. There is also, as you say, mental pollution, and we assume that when we begin to see things from a larger point of view, that a lot of that, I've got a lot of that mental pollution is, as you say, eliminated. Early awareness of idea might reduce the illusion. Yes, but the problem is, can we hold the entirety of the idea? And, DK seems to tell us in the beginning that it's a lot easier said than done. And so is our awareness of an idea ever, at this stage of our development, more than partial and narrow? That's our question. Whether we see it in the beginning, see it in the end, are we getting enough of the idea through into our illumined mind that we can really interpret what this idea is all about? Now, obviously, as we continue to be students of Master DK, we're going to get better and better at this. So, and I would say that the wider your point of view, the more easily mental pollution is eliminated. There's something about the light coming in from all the different angles which helps us get rid of all of this stuff going on in the lower mind, which affects how well the higher mind and intuition can get through to us. So I would just say what it is said about the second ray, that if you really, really study along the second ray line, you will be led to heights of realization, and something will happen whereby that which is studied becomes a rule of life and an intuition. Basically, it's somewhat here, and I think you've seen this before. 202, roughly. This is still in the first ray, but then the second ray, and here it is. The student on this ray is ever unsatisfied with his highest attainments, no matter how great his knowledge. His mind is still fixed on the unknown, the beyond, and on the heights as yet unscaled. So that's Master DK for us, and he's telling us a lot about his own nature as one who, having attained wisdom for the sake of others, spend themselves in giving it forth. It's really worth reading this, and there are probably 3 major types of second rays, but he seems to focus on one particular type, which he seems to represent. The Buddha being the other type, and the Christ being the still other type. Master DK represents something different. And then, look here, Frederick, this one's good. The characteristic method of approaching the path, and by the way, he gives it for each one of the different rays, so it's very valuable. The characteristic method of approaching the path would be by close and earnest study of the teachings till they become so much a part of the man's consciousness as no longer to be merely intellectual knowledge, but a spiritual rule of living, thus bringing in intuition and true wisdom. So I always go back to that little paragraph about the advantages of studying as Master DK studies, using the second ray method that he uses. But, there are bad types on the second ray as well as good types. So, like he says, you use the knowledge just for yourself and you don't care about others. That would be the bad type of second ray individual. Now, let's see why I may have gotten into that. Yeah, okay. So, wide study, deep study, patient study, meticulous study, piecing many things together so they each illumine the other, and working with the illumined mind to enhance soul revelation, because not all mind is pollution. The planetary logos has a mind. The solar logos has a mind. It goes on. It's a cosmic principle. Has to be used. And what would we think if we could run into the planetary logos' mind? Whoa, it would blow us away. We wouldn't think of it as illusion. So it's how to determine what is mental pollution, really. And can we wear it away with a broader type of perception? Oh, goodness, and I hope that wherever Anna is, that she has gotten her sound back. Now, there's a bit more here from Frederick and from Chris. The angel might help us to facilitate the vision. Absolutely. Our solar angel, manifesting as the angel of the presence within our higher nature, presents us all the time with visions of truth, some of which we have to learn to manifest. Okay. So the attunement with the streams of energy that the solar angel is sending forth, this is very important. And a lot of people that says they don't meditate with any regularity, and they miss what the solar angel is sending forth. So let's try to keep that fairly orderly in our approach to the inner life. Okay, thank you, Frederick, for those questions. Chris is asking or saying, as you eliminate the lens of the personal, the easier it is to, and I always lose this, maybe Michael or Joe could help me, it's just not printed properly.
The easier it is to see and become the larger picture.
Okay. As we eliminate the lens of the personal, the easier it is to see and become the larger picture. And I would say, yes, that's true. Now, that doesn't mean that we want to fall into the glamour of ignoring the personal, because a lot of people who are still very personally driven in an unconscious way and don't know it say, oh, well, I've eliminated the personal from my type of consciousness. It just isn't true. So to see the personal in the right way, but not to use it as the lens through which higher things are to be seen and understood, because it's too confining. It's too narrow, which is why before we begin a deep inquiry, meditative inquiry, we have to make sure we are aligned with the thought of the soul and with its meditation, if we are to move ourselves into contemplation, which is not as easy a thing as we might imagine. We just say, okay, oftentimes, well, let's contemplate this, let's contemplate that, and we don't know what we're saying. To contemplate is to make the object of your meditation completely intimate to your psyche. You merge with the object you are contemplating. You do not say, this is this and that is that. You get inside the object, person, whatever it is that you are contemplating. So it's another stage of the meditative process, beyond even normal meditation as studied in Virgo, so he says. How do we know when we're having an experience of the soul? I don't think that anybody can tell anybody else, but I'm sure that things widen, things become refined, and the factor of unity begins to descend. And we see things as in interrelation rather than separate from each other. Okay, I guess that's the best I can do on that one for the moment. Are there any other questions?
Anna has written, Holy Spirit is the attunement to solar angel, aligned will to soul question.
Okay, the last part was aligned will to
soul.
Yes, I think the Holy Spirit, the Brahma aspect, the tongues of flame manifesting as tongues of flame in the upper room for the disciples, was a kind of second initiation for the group. And we know that the first and second initiation are initiations of the threshold. But by the time we, or the group, reaches the second initiation, we have really entered the stream leading to the ashram, and the numerical resonance is correct. Second initiation and second aspect of divinity, the soul. So all I can say to all of us is, let us be prepared to be surprised. It's so easy, and I've done it all my life, to have a lot of words with which to understand inner things. It's okay if you want to build a scaffolding to uphold your edifice of thought and your approach. But it does not take the place of the, quote, promised land. The promised land being any new state of consciousness and being which looms ahead and which is inevitably accessible to you if you enter the right way. Now, when we go back to the ancient Hebrews, according to the Tibetan, they did not take the promised land in the correct way. They took it by the edge of the sword during a very potent first ray period in the history of cycles, and the tribes there were on the first ray anyway in terms of their soul qualities. But every one of us has an immediate promised land lying ahead of us. It may be the soul, it may be the triad, it may be the monad, it may be something more. And we have to learn the right way of entering it. Well, the Christ made this very evident to his disciples, telling them to remain and to pray and to fast and so forth. And he would send the Holy Spirit, and he did, and the tongues of flame appeared above the heads of the disciples, and they could understand each other no matter what language they might be speaking in. So a big interior kind of revelation came due to the Holy Spirit aspect, the Brahma aspect. We still have much to experience regarding the Holy Spirit, because that's where humanity is. Humanity is poised as a whole in its upper brackets to take the first initiation. It's a Brahmic initiation in a way, and something from the Holy Spirit will open up these inner worlds for such people. People who are sincere disciples and who have been accepted disciples for a while. Some people have been that. There were a couple in the books that had been accepted disciples already for 5 lives. It seems like a long time. And they are let into a promised land, which is even more refined and revelatory. Okay. So the Holy Spirit and the solar angel is coming in one respect from the second aspect of divinity, and in another respect from the third aspect. And I would say that what you say here looks pretty accurate to me, that when we're under the impulse of the Holy Spirit, the Brahma aspect, the Holy Ghost, whatever we want to say, we are more in position to understand the solar angel. Okay, Anna, thank you for that thought. When it comes to Michael Poitras, this reminds me of the Pisces-Virgo axis. Well, it's the second six-ray axis in one respect, except for the planetary rulers, of course. Actually, it reminds me of all the all the polarities, all extremes that lead us away from the fixed center within, as a conduit, the expanding center of the wheel, held in the open palm of right proportion, an expanding lotus of the heart. And I think you've got here, Michael, some quite evocative symbols. Now, I just want to say the obvious. Our task is to work with the symbol until it represents what is for us an experiential reality. We want to experience the planetary and zodiacal energies, and we want to experience the expansion of consciousness and of the heart. We want to experience the solar angel, angel of the presence, knowing about these things, all well and good, doing and being experienced in them, necessary as the next step, obviously, and you know that. Okay, friends. Okay. All right, friends. I think I don't want to overdo this. And we've had some nice responses and some good suggestions and some interesting questions. And lest this go on for too long, this is one of my 4-hour days when it comes to well, it's longer than that, but the actual broadcasting time is 4 hours, roughly. So I don't want to overdo it now. We do Cosmic Fire tonight, those who are interested. Now, look, you're learning, and so am I, through these webinars. But I've got to say that the Moria Federation is a very complete program of learning, derived from Master DK's curriculum for the preparatory schools. Now, the preparatory schools are not easy, and they don't even exist yet. They will be, the equivalent of any good university, and they will add to it the whole spiritual dimension, which a university does not, in general, add. So they will be spiritual universities. And that's the purpose of the Moria Federation, and since Master Moria is the head of all the esoteric schools and organizations, and his work with KH and DK is very relevant in that regard, we are studying things which are of great value. So listening and participating in these programs is good. And I tell you, I always learn a lot. And I'm assuming you do too. But it's not quite the same as saying, okay, in these next 5 years, I'm really going to apply myself to learning in depth what can be taught in such an organization as the Moria Federation, and with exposure to quite a number of experienced teachers. Even right now, in our list right here, we have people who are not members of the Moria Federation and others who have graduated. And we all get together and we share what we know and what we have experienced. That's the beauty of this modern technology. Here I am and looking out in the Finnish forest, and it's an overcast day, and it's dark, and it's 9:30 in the morning, and it's still dark, quite dark, and yet here we are communicating to the edification of the mind and the heart and all of that. So we're very fortunate to be living in the times in one way in which we are living. And these next 5 years, I'll just say, let's learn everything we can and experience everything we can, because a great event is about to take place, and that is the third stage of preparation for the externalization and reappearance, with the giving out of the new treatises from Master DK. Who knows what he has in mind for us, and the least we can do is learn what we have been given. I mean, it's impossible, of course. I've given you more than you can ever assimilate, he says. But okay, but let's really apply ourselves. Okay. So thank you for that. And now let's meditate. All right. Well, glamour is really one thing in a way. It's all based on mistaken identity. It's all based on partiality, on the inability to see wholeness, the premature tendency, or the tendency of emotion prematurely to fasten upon the part rather than the whole. So, as we circle around looking at these glamours, they're all related and interrelated. Now, I have seen lately, glamour is, the fruit of glamour is falling off the glamour tree these days. Just lies and distortions, and I've been noticing that when they say we live in a post-truth era, there's a lot to that. It's like you can just make it up so you get your way. It's not right. And of course, it's not progressive. So we see many people disregarding the truth, because their desire to push a certain point of view is just too strong. Their particular bias, they are fervent about their bias. And they put so much emotional energy into it, so much aspiration, that they just haven't got room in their minds to calmly consider the other person's point of view. So, okay, it's a problem. So we're going to meditate. I keep on changing the theme of meditation, but they all circle around each other in a kind of core group of glamours based on misidentification, just, mistaken identity, and thinking that the part is the whole, and just not identifying with life ahead of the brief little life cycle they're going to be living now. They don't believe that the tree they plant now is going to be the tree they experience in fullness later. They don't believe in the idea that you make your bed and you lie in it. It's as if you're never going to go back to that bed. You just throw it all together and you don't have to worry about it. They make a mess of the physical plane and forget that they're the ones who have to experience the mess. And if someone else is the one who has to experience, they don't care. So there are certain attitudes which are irresponsible. And emotion blinds you to responsibility, and responsibility is the first real sign that the influence of the soul is at work. That's what he tells us. It's not feeling good about something, feeling happy about it and all that. It's the sense of responsibility that is revealing the soul. Okay. So with that in mind, we're going to be meditating on the glamour of the disregard for truth, because desire to promote a certain point of view is too strong. Attachment to a partial point of view is too strong. And the bias, the misinterpretation onto which the individual is holding is too intense, too fervent, blocking out everything else. Okay. So a little bit of silence as we come together wherever we may be. So wherever we may be, space is not the issue, and we have a certain non-local soul consciousness bringing us all together. Now we're entering what DK calls the world of the greatest illusion. Now he doesn't mean technically the mental part. He just means illusion in general. And the astral plane is overpowering at this time. So we trace the light with this cross of divinity. We're going to trace light for protection of the individual and of the group in front of us. A bigger cross is being traced before the group. As a soul, I work in light. And darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light. I work, and from that point I never move. If we encircle the cross, we are coming closer to the symbol of the earth itself. Now let us unite three forms of light, of matter, of mind, and the light of the soul. Maybe we can just do this because we know what we're doing by now. So we lift up the light of matter to the level of the mind. We blend the logic and reasoning powers of discovery in the mind with the light of matter. Vitality supports the thinking process, and we bring down the light of the soul. Blending the soul light with the other two, a triple light is made into one, and we're going to see the subtle things. We're going to know the damage that has been done. We're going to know the strength needed to dissipate the glamour. And so we say together, followed by the sacred word, the light is one. And in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Okay. now the formula. And as we say these words, we visualize the great searchlight we have been creating. We turn it on out of the triple light, and we turn it upon the clouds, the mists, the fogs, the veils, the glamours of the astral plane. Radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. We visualize this happening. The searchlight is finding the glamours, and especially this glamour we're working on today, which is a disregard of truth because we are so intensely biased in our partial idealism, our distorted attitudes, our partial attitudes. And we want to strengthen that beam with the will, bringing down the spiritual will, from the higher sources, let us say, beginning with the monad, but not really, even beyond that, of course. And we bring the stream of spiritual will into our group beam and strengthen it so it can do its job, finding the glamour, dissipating the glamour, and we say, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. Now our goal is to discover this glamour which makes us not care about the truth. Why? Because we are so wrapped up in a certain partial desire that we want to see fulfilled, that we don't care whether it's based on truth or not. whether it's wise or not, we just don't care. And we have this fervent bias. You've seen people, it's fanatical, it's one point of view only, and no caring or regard for what you may be saying or what others have of value to say or to think. Now we think of the harm that has been done in this world through the disregard of truth and the pushing of a glamorous, superheated point of view which is very partial, which is distorted. We see it everywhere. What harm has been done, we think? And surely if we want to build for humanity a distorted structure upon which they will base their efforts and will thus fail, then we should continue to ignore the truth and just push our own point of view. But if we're going to make real progress as a race and fulfill our role as a kingdom of nature, we have to work differently. And so these words of power give us the hint. Let's think together. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of the disregard for truth because we desire so much a partial truth or even a distortion. The power of our united light negates the quality of this glamour from affecting humanity, this disregard of truth because we have emotional attachment to some distorted part of the reflection of an idea. the power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour of the disregard of truth, this glamour of emotionally pushing just one probably distorted point of view. Now, friends, let us enter our own method here. 5 minutes of silence and what DK calls intensity of purpose whilst this work is proceeding. And we'll work with the words of power, or however you want to work, to build in a real proper regard for truth and something more than just a fixation upon one probably distorted aspect of the truth. So we work together to do that. We have to learn to think widely and deeply, not just about our biases and what we prefer. Lately, in politics, there's such an example of the pushing of a partial point of view as if it's the whole thing, and always something is missing because of this overly emotional fixation upon something that is just a small part of the whole. So if we can teach people to think broadly, we will be using one of the 7 methods of inducing soul control. It's called, in esoteric psychology 2, the quality of the hidden vision. And instead of becoming emphatically invested in a distortion or a partiality, the hidden vision sustained by those who know the plan will come into focus. And everyone will regard the truth as being of the utmost importance, because it will set us free. We withdraw our beam into the triple light on the mental plane, we send the lights to their appropriate places, the light of matter, the light of mind, and the light of soul, and we sound the Om 3 times in the realization that we have done a little bit to help clarify, cleanse the astral plane, and with it some aspects of the lower mind and also the realm of glamour, or rather Maya, which is the etheric physical nature. Okay, friends, we persist. We have our creative imagination. We have the occult techniques. We have the beam of light. We have the support from each other. We persist. Next time we get together, as I say, it will be relatively late Thanksgiving for some in the U.S. and other countries. Well, you have other holidays. And tonight, later on, 8 p.m. GMT, we're going to continue to get this broad overview of things. through cosmic fire, and that will help us avoid this overemphasis upon the part, ignoring the truth which is revealed through wholeness. Let's learn to think widely and deeply, and thus eliminate illusion and the tendency for illusions to be grasped by the astral body and made into distortions and glamours. So our whole team is wishing you lots of love and many blessings. Joe and Biel and Michael and Olivia, Tuya, and myself. We wish you the very best and hope you have a nice day or sleep, whatever you're going to do, and we'll be back that's in about 12 hours from now. And you have in your chat box, you have the link right there. Because it's going to be another webinar, you have the link. Okay, thank you for being with us, and let's continue to work esoterically and help to straighten out the condition in which humanity finds itself. To straighten out is to achieve the right kind of alignment with the higher powers. We will see you soon. Bye-bye.